Something strange is happening in Cleveland right now, and the closer you look at this quarterback situation, the harder it becomes to ignore. What started as a simple off-season discussion has slowly turned into one of the most fascinating battles surrounding the Browns, because the story everyone thought they understood just a few weeks ago suddenly does not look so obvious anymore. For months, fans heard different opinions about where this team was heading. Some people believed the quarterback picture was already decided. Others felt there was still another chapter waiting to be written. But as practices continued, reports came out, and conversations inside the football world started changing, one thing became clear: this competition might have more layers than anyone originally expected. And that is what makes this situation so interesting. This is not just about one player trying to win a job. It is about a franchise that has spent years searching for stability at the most important position in football. Every throw gets analyzed. Every practice report creates a reaction. Every small update turns into a bigger debate because Browns fans understand exactly how much this decision could impact the future. The biggest surprise has been how quickly the conversation around Shedeur Sanders started shifting. Coming into the situation, there were plenty of questions. People wondered how fast he could adjust, how he would handle the pressure, and whether he could put himself into a serious conversation. That is normal for any young quarterback trying to prove himself at the next level. But then the discussions started changing. Reports and observations from around the team suggested that this might not be as predictable as some people originally believed. Suddenly, the same competition that many thought had a clear direction became something fans wanted to watch much more closely. That doesn't mean anything has already been decided. Training camp, preseason moments, and real football situations are what truly separate quarterbacks. A few impressive moments early do not guarantee anything, and a few mistakes do not end a player's chances. But what matters is that the door appears to still be open, and in Cleveland, an open quarterback competition always creates attention. Because the Browns aren't just choosing a name on a depth chart, they're trying to answer a much bigger question. Are they building around the experience they already have, or are they watching a new possibility develop right in front of them? And that is where this entire story becomes complicated. The pressure is not only on the quarterbacks, it's on the coaches, the front office, and everyone involved in deciding what direction this franchise takes next. Because if Cleveland has learned anything from its history, it is that quarterback decisions can shape everything. One choice can change the energy around a locker room. One unexpected performance can completely rewrite a team's plans. And sometimes, the player people overlook early becomes the player everyone is talking about later. But to understand why this conversation exploded and why so many opinions suddenly started changing, you have to go back to where the story really started, when early predictions about this quarterback battle began falling apart. The first sign that this quarterback conversation was not going to follow the expected path came when early opinions started turning into bigger conclusions before the real competition had even begun. That's the dangerous part of the NFL offseason. Sometimes a few practices, a few reports, and a few observations can create a storyline that spreads everywhere before there's enough information to truly understand what is happening. Fans want answers quickly, analysts want to predict the future. Everyone wants to know who is ahead and who is falling behind. But football rarely works that way. Early off-season practices are not the same as a real game environment. There are no full defensive schemes attacking a quarterback. There's no regular season pressure. There are no moments where a player has to stand in the pocket with everything on the line and make a franchise-changing throw. They're important, but they're only a small piece of a much bigger evaluation. And that is where the Browns situation became so interesting. At first, many people around the football world believed Cleveland's quarterback direction was already becoming clear. The expectation was that experience would have the advantage, and the younger quarterbacks would need more time before becoming serious factors in the conversation. On paper, that made sense. Veteran quarterbacks usually enter these situations with the benefit of experience. They understand NFL defenses, they understand preparation, and they've already been through the pressure that comes with leading a professional locker room. But the problem comes when early expectations start getting treated as final decisions. Because inside NFL buildings, coaches usually look at things differently. They are not only judging who looks comfortable on day one, they are watching who improves. They are studying how players respond after mistakes. They are looking for small signs that someone is starting to understand the system better each week. And according to discussions around Cleveland's offseason, that is where the conversation around Shedeur Sanders started becoming more interesting. Instead of disappearing from the competition, the young quarterback continued creating discussion. Reports and observers began focusing more on his development, his adjustment process, and the progress he was showing while learning a new NFL environment. That does not automatically mean a player has won anything. Progress and potential are different from proving yourself when games actually matter. Every young quarterback still has to show consistency when the speed increases and the pressure becomes real. But it did challenge one idea, that the entire story had already been written. Suddenly, people who believed the competition would be simple had to look at the situation again. The conversation was no longer only about what everyone expected before practices began. It became about what was actually happening as players continued developing. And this is where football can surprise everyone. A quarterback battle is not always won by the player who starts with the most attention. Sometimes it is won by the player who keeps improving every single day. Coaches notice the small details that fans might not see. They notice confidence growing. They notice faster decisions. They notice whether teammates respond when someone steps into the huddle. Those little things slowly start changing the bigger picture. That is why judging any quarterback competition too early can become a mistake. A player can struggle early and find rhythm later. Another player can start strong and fail to separate himself when the competition becomes harder. The Browns know this better than almost any franchise because they have spent years searching for the right answer at quarterback. Every new possibility creates excitement, but it also creates pressure. Fans have watched enough changes to understand that the first story is not always the final story. And that is exactly why this offseason became such a talking point. Because what looked like a predictable situation started becoming unpredictable. What looked like a simple decision started creating new questions. And the player many people were still trying to figure out suddenly became one of the biggest names in the conversation. But the biggest change was not just that opinions started shifting, it was why they started shifting. Because Shedeur Sanders was beginning to force people to talk about something completely different. Not expectations, not outside noise, but what he was actually showing on the field. The most interesting thing about a young quarterback entering a situation like this is that the conversation usually starts before the player ever gets a real chance to control it. People create expectations, they create predictions. They decide what a player can become based on college performances, draft opinions, interviews, and everything surrounding their name. Sometimes those expectations are positive, sometimes they create even more pressure. And for Shedeur Sanders, the attention was already there before he ever stepped onto the field in Cleveland. Everyone knew his journey would be watched differently. His name carried attention, his college career created debate, his confidence created conversation. And because of that, every single moment became something people wanted to analyze. A good throw created excitement. A mistake created questions. A simple practice update could suddenly become a major discussion. But eventually, every quarterback reaches the same point. The outside noise starts to fade, and the only thing that matters is what coaches see when the player is working. That is where this story started becoming different, because instead of the conversation only being about expectations, reports around Cleveland began focusing on development. The question was no longer just where Shedeur started, it became about where he was going. And that difference matters. A rookie quarterback is not judged only by being perfect immediately. Coaches understand there will be adjustments. The NFL game moves faster, defensive looks become more complicated, the responsibility becomes bigger. A young quarterback has to process more information than ever before. The important question becomes simple. Is he learning? Is he making corrections? Is he showing signs that the game is slowing down? Those are the details that can change the way a coaching staff views a player. Because physical talent gets attention, but growth earns trust. A quarterback can have the strongest arm in the room and still struggle if he cannot command an offense. He has to understand timing. He has to communicate with teammates. He has to handle difficult moments without losing confidence. And according to conversations surrounding Cleveland's offseason, those smaller parts of Shedeur's development became the reason people started paying closer attention. It wasn't just about highlight plays, it was about the process. How does he respond after a bad rep? How quickly does he adjust when coaches correct something? How comfortable does he look leading an offense? Those are the questions that decide whether a young quarterback is simply talented or whether he has a real chance to grow into something bigger. And this is where the Browns found themselves, facing a much more complicated situation. Because if a young player keeps showing improvement, the conversation naturally changes. At first, the question might be, can he compete? Then slowly it becomes, how close is this competition actually becoming? That shift is what grabs everyone's attention. Now, that does not mean anyone should ignore reality. Potential alone does not win games. A quarterback still has to prove himself against real NFL defenses. He has to handle pressure situations, avoid costly mistakes, and show consistency when everything speeds up. Every promising young quarterback eventually reaches that test. But the reason Shedeur became such a major talking point is because the discussion moved beyond where people thought he would be. It became about whether his progress was changing the timeline. And in the NFL, timelines are everything. Teams create plans. They imagine how a roster will develop. They think they know when a player will be ready. But sometimes a player forces the organization to reconsider those plans. Sometimes improvement happens faster than expected. Sometimes the competition becomes closer than people originally predicted. And when that happens, a team has to adjust. The challenge for Cleveland is figuring out how much weight they should put into each part of the evaluation. Do they prioritize experience and what has already been proven, or do they pay closer attention to improvement in what a player could become with more opportunities? That is the debate every franchise faces when they are trying to find long-term stability at quarterback. And for Browns fans, this conversation carries even more emotion because they understand the history. Cleveland has spent years searching for consistency at the position. Different quarterbacks have arrived with different expectations, and every time a new possibility appears, fans naturally wonder if this could finally become the answer they have been waiting for. That history creates excitement, but it also creates pressure because everyone knows how important the next decision could be. The reality is that quarterback competitions are rarely decided by one single moment. They are built through hundreds of small details that happen every day. A coach is watching how a quarterback handles a difficult practice. They're watching what happens after a mistake. They're looking at leadership, preparation, communication, and whether the players around him believe in the direction he is taking them. Those are things that do not always appear on a stat sheet. A completion percentage from practice does not tell the entire story. A highlight throw doesn't automatically prove someone is ready. A bad moment doesn't automatically mean someone cannot develop. Coaches have to look at everything together, and that is why these decisions take time. The Browns also have to think about the bigger picture surrounding their roster. They have players trying to win now. They have young talent they want to develop. They have coaches trying to build an identity. The quarterback they choose does not just impact one position, it affects the entire offense. A younger quarterback could match the timeline of other developing players and grow with the team. A more experienced quarterback could provide stability while the rest of the roster competes. Both approaches have arguments behind them, and that's exactly why the discussion has become so intense. This is where patience becomes one of the most important factors. The worst thing a team can do is constantly change direction before they truly understand what they have. Development requires time. Evaluation requires honesty. And sometimes organizations have to block out outside opinions long enough to make the decision that fits their own vision. Because outside the building, everyone will have an opinion. Fans will debate every practice update. Analysts will break down every throw. Every report will create a new reaction. But inside the organization, the only thing that matters is finding the quarterback who gives the team the best chance to move forward. And that is why Cleveland's situation has become so fascinating. It's not just a competition between names, it's a competition between different ideas about where the franchise should go next. But while everyone was focused on the quarterbacks themselves, another major storyline started developing around the people making the decisions, because the choices coming from the front office could end up being just as important as anything happening on the field. Every quarterback competition eventually reaches a point where the attention moves beyond the players. The throws matter, the practices matter, the performances matter, but at some stage, the bigger questions start being directed toward the people responsible for building the team. And that is exactly where Cleveland's situation has become even more complicated. Because the Browns are not just evaluating quarterbacks, they're evaluating a direction. The front office has to make decisions that don't only impact one game or one season. Every move they make at the quarterback position can affect the future of the roster, the salary structure, the development of younger players, and the confidence of everyone inside the building. That is why these choices receive so much attention. A quarterback decision is rarely just a football decision. It becomes a statement about what the organization believes. And when a team already has multiple quarterbacks in the conversation, every possible move creates even more questions. If Cleveland shows interest in another option, some fans will see it as smart competition. Others will wonder if it creates unnecessary confusion. If the team stays with the players already on the roster, some will view it as patience and commitment, while others will question if they explored every possible opportunity. That is the difficult balance every front office has to manage. Because adding talent always sounds simple from the outside. Fans hear about another quarterback becoming available and immediately start debating whether the team should make a move. But inside an NFL building, the conversation is much deeper than that. Teams have to ask themselves important questions. Does this player actually fit the plan? Does the move help the roster? Does it create a better future, or does it only create more uncertainty? Those answers are not always obvious, and that is why some of the speculation surrounding Cleveland has created such a strong reaction. Whenever reports or rumors connect a team to another quarterback possibility, the conversation immediately grows. Some people believe competition makes everyone better. Others believe constantly adding new names prevents a team from fully developing the players it already has. Both sides understand one important thing. Cleveland cannot afford to make quarterback decisions without a clear vision. The Browns know better than almost anyone how difficult it is to find stability at this position. A team can have talent everywhere else, but if the quarterback plan keeps changing, building consistent success becomes much harder. That is why the handling of Shedeur Sanders has become such an important storyline. It is not just about whether he earns a role immediately, it's about whether Cleveland believes there is something worth developing. When a young quarterback shows progress, teams have to decide how much patience they are willing to give. Development is not always a straight line. There will be impressive moments. There will also be mistakes. The question becomes whether the organization trusts the process. At the same time, the front office has a responsibility to keep improving the team. They cannot ignore opportunities just because they already have players at a position. The best organizations are always evaluating. They're always asking if there is a move that can make them stronger. But there is a difference between improving competition and creating uncertainty. That difference is what Cleveland has to figure out. because every quarterback added to the conversation changes something. It changes practice reps, it changes development time, it changes how coaches divide attention. And for a young player trying to grow, those opportunities can become extremely valuable. This is why the next decisions from the Browns' leadership will reveal a lot about what they truly believe. Are they still searching for answers? Are they trying to create the most competitive environment possible? Or are they getting closer to choosing a direction and allowing the players already inside the building to prove themselves? Those are the questions fans are watching closely. And the reality is, there may not be a perfect answer. Every option carries risk. Staying patient requires trust. Making another move requires confidence that the reward is worth the change. That pressure comes with trying to solve the hardest position in professional football. For Cleveland, this moment is about more than finding a starter. It is about proving that the organization has a plan. After years of uncertainty surrounding the quarterback position, fans want to see consistency. They want to see development. They want to see decisions that build towards something bigger. And while the front office continues weighing every possibility, another conversation has started growing outside the building. One about how players are discussed, criticized, and judged before their stories are even finished. Because for many fans, the biggest debate is no longer just about talent. It's about whether every player is being evaluated by the same standard. One of the biggest reasons this Browns quarterback conversation has become bigger than a normal offseason battle is because fans are not only debating throws, practice reports, or depth charts anymore. They're also questioning how players are evaluated before they ever get a full opportunity to prove themselves. Every quarterback who enters the league faces criticism. That comes with the position. Teams need to know if a player can handle pressure, lead a locker room, adjust to a faster game, and perform when everything is on the line. Those are fair questions that every young quarterback must answer. But sometimes the conversation moves away from football and starts focusing on everything surrounding a player instead of what they are actually showing on the field. That is why the discussion around Shedeur Sanders has become such a major talking point among Browns fans. Since his college career, Shedeur has been a player who naturally creates attention. His confidence, his personality, his background, and the spotlight around his name have all been discussed heavily. Some people view that confidence as something a quarterback needs. Others question whether that attention creates extra pressure. But regardless of which side people are on, the reality is that almost every move he makes becomes part of a larger conversation. A normal practice moment becomes a headline, a small mistake becomes a debate, a sign of improvement creates a completely different reaction. That is what happens when a player enters the league already carrying major expectations. For many fans, the frustration comes from the feeling that the conversation should eventually return to football. Because at the end of the day, a quarterback is not successful because of opinions, attention, or outside debates. The only thing that lasts is performance. Can he understand the offense? Can he protect the football? Can he make adjustments when defenses challenge him? Can he earn the trust of the players around him? Those are the questions that actually determine whether a quarterback has a future. Everything else might create discussion, but it does not decide games.
And this is where the evaluation process becomes complicated. Young quarterbacks rarely develop in a perfect straight line. There are going to be impressive moments where everything looks like it is coming together, and there are going to be difficult moments where mistakes happen. That is normal. The important part is not whether a player is perfect immediately. The important part is whether they learn from those situations and continue moving forward. Coaches are watching the details that most people never see. They are watching preparation. They are watching communication. They are watching how a quarterback reacts when something goes wrong. That is why some fans believe patience is necessary before making final judgments. The NFL has seen countless players get labeled too early, both positively and negatively. Some players receive massive expectations and need more time to reach their potential. Others are overlooked at first and slowly earn bigger opportunities through consistency and improvement. A player's first chapter does not always tell the entire story, and that is why development remains such an important part of building a team. For Shedeur, the attention surrounding him makes that process even louder. There are people who strongly believe in his ability and think he deserves a real opportunity to show what he can become. There are others who want to see more proof before buying into the excitement. Both viewpoints are part of sports. Competition naturally creates disagreement. But the Browns cannot allow outside opinions to make their decision for them. The organization has to focus on what happens inside the building, because the coaches are the ones seeing the full picture every single day. The reality is that earning a quarterback role in the NFL requires more than talent. A player has to show leadership. They have to command the offense. They have to prove that teammates can believe in them during difficult situations. The strongest arm or the biggest name does not automatically win a competition. Trust is built through repetition, preparation, and consistency. That is the standard every quarterback has to reach. And that is why the Browns' situation has captured so much attention. It represents the difficult balance every team faces when evaluating a young player. You cannot ignore mistakes, but you also cannot ignore growth. You cannot crown someone based only on potential, but you also cannot close the door before the development process has a chance to happen. Finding that balance is what separates organizations that build stability from organizations that keep searching for answers. For Cleveland fans, this conversation carries even more weight because they understand how important the quarterback position has been for this franchise. They have watched years of changes, new hopes, and new questions. So when another possible answer appears, every detail feels important. Every update creates a reaction because everyone wants to know if this time could finally be different. But eventually, the debates and predictions can only go so far. The opinions will continue, the reports will continue. People will keep choosing sides. But football has a way of revealing the truth when the pressure rises. Training camp, preseason opportunities, and real competition will provide answers that conversations never could. And when that moment arrives, the focus will shift away from narratives and back to the only thing that truly matters: who proves they are ready to lead the Cleveland Browns. The moment training camp begins, everything around this quarterback conversation changes. The predictions, debates, and outside opinions that dominated the offseason can only carry the story so far. Eventually, every player reaches the point where reputation no longer matters, and performance becomes the only thing that can move the conversation forward. That is why this next stage is so important for Cleveland. The Browns are not just watching a few practices to decide who has a good day. They are looking for signs of who can handle the responsibility of leading an NFL team when the pressure starts becoming real. Training camp creates a completely different environment from early off-season workouts. The intensity increases, the competition becomes stronger. Coaches start installing more detailed situations. Quarterbacks have to make quicker decisions, communicate at a higher level, and show that they can respond when things do not go perfectly. That is usually when teams begin discovering what they actually have. A player can look impressive when everything is controlled, but football is built around adapting when situations become difficult. The quarterback who handles those moments usually starts separating himself. And that is why the Browns' quarterback battle has become so fascinating. This is not just about who can make the most impressive throw during practice. A highlight moment can grab attention, but coaches are searching for something much deeper. They want consistency. They want command. They want someone who understands the offense and can keep the entire unit moving. Sometimes, the most important plays aren't the ones that get shared everywhere. Sometimes it's simply making the correct decision, avoiding a mistake, or keeping control when the defense creates problems. For Shedeur Sanders, this stage represents a major opportunity. The questions around any young quarterback are always about growth and adjustment. Talent gets a player into the conversation, but preparation and consistency are what keep them there. Training camp gives him the chance to show how much progress has been made and whether the improvement people have talked about can continue when the competition becomes more demanding. Every rep matters because each one gives coaches more information about where he is in his development. But this is also where the challenge becomes bigger. In the NFL, nothing is given because of potential alone. A young quarterback still has to prove he can execute against professional defenses. He has to show that he can handle mistakes without allowing one bad moment to become several more. He has to demonstrate that teammates can trust him when the situation becomes uncomfortable. Those are the qualities that separate a player with talent from a player who can actually lead. At the same time, experience cannot be ignored. Veteran quarterbacks understand parts of the game that only come from years of facing NFL competition. They have seen different defensive looks. They understand how quickly things can change during a season. They know the responsibility that comes with controlling an offense. That experience creates value, and it is one of the reasons quarterback decisions are rarely simple. That is the difficult position Cleveland is facing. They are not choosing between an obvious answer and an impossible option. They are comparing different paths. One path is built around experience in what is already known. Another path is built around development in what could happen in the future. Both carry risks, both require belief, and both could shape where this franchise goes next. The biggest mistake the Browns could make is allowing outside pressure to rush the process. Quarterback competitions need real evaluation. They need difficult situations. Coaches need to see how players respond when everything is not perfect. Anyone can look comfortable when the offense is working smoothly, but leadership is revealed when something breaks down and the quarterback has to find a solution. That is why every practice, meeting, and preseason opportunity could become important. A single throw might not decide everything, but a pattern will. Coaches will notice who continues improving. They will notice who earns confidence from teammates. They will notice who takes control of the offense when the competition becomes serious. And for Browns fans, this is what makes the upcoming period so exciting and stressful at the same time. After years of searching for consistency at quarterback, every possible solution creates hope. Nobody wants another short-term answer. Nobody wants another situation where the team has to restart again. The goal is finding someone who can create stability and give the organization a clear direction. That is why this battle feels bigger than a normal training camp storyline. It represents a possible turning point. Cleveland has talent, Cleveland has expectations, but the quarterback decision will influence everything that happens next. The outside conversations have created the buildup. The reports have created the debates. The speculation has created the questions. But now, football has to provide the answers. Because once training camp truly begins, it will no longer matter who had the strongest argument during the offseason. It will no longer matter who received the most attention or who created the biggest headlines. The only thing that will matter is which quarterback steps onto the field, earns trust, and proves they are ready to lead the Cleveland Browns into the future. But even after a starter is chosen, there is still a much bigger question waiting for this franchise, because this decision is not only about one season, it could define what Cleveland becomes for years to come.